Due to a combination of savvy marketing, a powerful international draw, and not taking itself too seriously, the Fast and Furious franchise has become a veritable money-printing machine. But not everyone wants to be a part of it. Here are some actors who turned down roles in the Fast saga. Denzel Washington would have been a massive get for the Fast and Furious franchise. The series has boasted its fair share of big-time actors, but Denzel is on another level. Not only has he been incredibly successful at the box office, but he's also taken home 2 Oscars for his roles in Glory and Training Day.
Yeah, I know you got secrets. Everybody got secrets. Didn't know you like to get wet, though.
Deadline writes that Universal approached Denzel to appear at the end of the 6th film, which would seg into him playing the role of the main villain in Furious 7. He apparently was not interested, however, and turned down the opportunity. Ultimately, the role went to Jason Statham. Statham is obviously a big star in his own right, but not quite on the same level as the 2-time Oscar winner. You may be unfamiliar with the name Deepika Padukone, unless you're a big fan of Bollywood. However, the model actress is hugely popular in Indian cinema, and that makes her a star in the largest film-producing industry in the world. The Fast and Furious franchise owes much of its success to the international market, so it makes sense that they'd want to recruit worldwide stars into the fold. They tried to do just that with Padukone in Furious 7, but she had to turn down the offer. At the time, Padukone had never appeared in an American film, as she told India Today. She had already committed to a domestic film and didn't feel right backing out, but she also said she would love to do a Hollywood film in the future. She got her wish just a few years later, and in a role alongside Vin Diesel as well. Padukone appeared in XXX: Return of Xander Cage in 2017 and has reportedly been cast in XXX 4. When the Fast and Furious franchise began in 2001, Ja Rule was one of the biggest rappers in the world. He was in the process of making the transition to acting and appeared in a very small role in The Fast and the Furious as a character named Edwin, who went up against Paul Walker and Vin Diesel's characters in a street race. He did not win. Interestingly, Ja Rule could have gone on to be one of the faces of the franchise if he'd been interested. In an interview with Grantland, John Singleton, the director of Too Fast, Too Furious, recalled, "Ja got too big for himself. He turned it down. He turned down $500,000 to be in the sequel." Singleton said he repeatedly tried to get Ja Rule to the table, but eventually decided to swap his character out for one played by a different rapper, Ludacris, who has since appeared in more than half of the Fast and Furious films. Apparently, Ludacris wasn't the first potential replacement for Ja Rule. Originally, rapper Redman was eyed to take on the role. Once Ja Rule dropped out of Too Fast, Too Furious, Redman was apparently geared up to replace him. He apparently had to drop out due to scheduling conflicts. The TV series Method and Red came out around the same time, as did a few other projects. Instead, the role went to Ludacris. Just like Ja Rule, Redman's acting career has been fairly stagnant since this role passed him by. It would have been interesting to see how the franchise might have evolved if either one of them had been cast instead of Ludacris. Even though the Fast and Furious franchise has become a blockbuster series over the years, it took a few films for it to find its footing and figure out what it wanted to be. Most of the main players have stuck with it over the long haul, but the core group didn't come together overnight. In fact, in 2017, a producer revealed that Timothy Olyphant was initially targeted to star in the first film. Apparently, when The Fast and the Furious was originally pitched to Universal, the studio agreed to produce the film as long as Olyphant was cast as the lead role of Dom Toretto. Olyphant turned the role down, which brought the filmmakers to their backup, Vin Diesel. Diesel took the reins of the franchise and has appeared in almost every film since. The Fast and Furious franchise sure loves its European baddies. In recent films, we've seen Luke Evans, Jason Statham, and Idris Elba all show up as central antagonists. An impressive roster that also almost included David Tennant. Yes, we reportedly almost saw the one-time Doctor Who tangling with Vin Diesel and Dwayne Johnson. So what went wrong?
Well, I don't know. I can't worry about everything.
According to Latino Review, Tennant was in talks with director Justin Lin about taking on a major role in Fast and Furious 6. We don't know which part he was being considered for, but it seems likely that it would have been one of the Shaw brothers, roles that eventually went to Evans and Statham. Whatever ultimately went down during negotiations, Tennant wound up moving on to other projects. Tennant has proven he can do over-the-top villainy very well. His performance in Jessica Jones as the despicable Kilgrave gave audiences one of the best Marvel villains to date. We certainly wouldn't mind seeing him get behind the wheel in the Fast and Furious franchise. Another rapper who was targeted for the franchise but had to turn it down, Eminem, was actually approached twice to be a part of the Fast and Furious films. Both times, prior commitments kept him from coming on board, and both roles he turned down would go on to be major parts in the films. Eminem was actually offered a very big role in the first film. He was approached to take on the role of Brian O'Connor, which eventually went to Paul Walker. When Eminem was approached to take the role, he was currently in development of his own film, 8 Mile, and had to remain available for it. Just think, Eminem could have been one of the faces of the franchise. According to Fuse, Eminem was later approached to do a song for the soundtrack of Furious 7. He again turned it down due to a different film. He was already heavily involved with the movie Southpaw, and he did not want to have multiple songs competing with one another. Eliza Dushku was extremely in demand when The Fast and the Furious was in development. Apparently, the role of Mia Toretto was not only offered to Dushku, but was reportedly written specifically with her in mind. Dushku turned the role down for unknown reasons, but she was extremely busy at the time with both television and film projects, so it isn't hard to imagine why. Many different stars were reportedly attached after Dushku passed. Jessica Biel, Kirsten Dunst, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Bijou Phillips, and Natalie Portman are all rumored to have auditioned for the role before it went to Jordana Brewster. Vin Diesel returned to the franchise fold later, but he did refuse an offer to appear in Too Fast, Too Furious, and the reason is fascinating. Diesel was offered $25 million to star in Too Fast, Too Furious, but didn't like the script or the direction the series was headed. He viewed the first film as a classic and said, "I was an idealist, and to me, the script wasn't continuing the story. They were capitalizing on the brand and milking the success of it as long as they could." Of course, since Diesel's full-time return to the franchise with the 4th installment, the Fast and Furious movies have morphed from a story about cops out to infiltrate a street racing gang into a wildly over-the-top saga, fueled by globe-trotting action, espionage, and an increasingly casual relationship with the laws of nature.
Get ready! Ground's coming fast!
Continuing the story will only take you so far. This one is a bit of a cheat because, as far as we can tell, Guardians of the Galaxy star Dave Bautista has never actually been offered a role in the franchise. That said, his refusal of a fan pitch was enough of an adamant refusal that we had to include it. Once the news broke that John Cena would be appearing in F9, a fan tagged Bautista on Twitter with this pitch: The Rock and John Cena will get a Fast and Furious spin-off also, and Dave Bautista will be the villain. Bautista responded with 2 nauseated emojis and the words, "Thank you for your consideration, #I'd rather do good films." Now, we love Bautista, but that's a pretty bold response from a man who has starred in not 1, but 2 Escape Plan sequels. Besides those 2 missteps, however, Bautista has been fairly choosy with most of his roles. Never say never, but that big-time dunk on Vin Diesel's franchise will probably keep the animal out of Fast and Furious films for a while. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about the Fast saga are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.